second while the live stream kind of gets itself moving.
Okay.
When it gets itself moving.
Okay. What'd you say, Mandy? All good?
It's all good. Sorry, it was going
Gotcha.
on two screens, YouTube and Zoom, so it kind of overlapped the sound.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. We'll get started. I'm Meg Reed, the Coastal Policy Specialist here at the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, and this is our third meeting of the Coastal Public Access Rulemaking Advisory Committee. So thanks all for being here. As a reminder, we are live streaming the meeting on our DLCD YouTube page and recording it so that you can review it later. And we will be taking notes and providing a meeting summary after the fact. And just a reminder that everything is public record. It's too many things on my screen. Okay, so today we're going to mostly be focused on the draft rules and the impact statements. And hopefully you all got those in the Rulemaking Advisory Committee packet last week that was sent. But just a few reminders. You should have access to the chat today. And can chat to everyone, but shouldn't be able to chat to each other individually, but just to the whole group. And so hopefully you can then add your name and affiliation into the chat. And because we are going to skip verbal introductions today, we have a lot to get through and want to maximize our time. So instead of going around the room like we have been, please just enter into the chat your name and your organization or interest that you're representing here today. If you have any technological difficulties during the meeting today, please reach out to Mandy. Her email and phone is there on the screen. We will be mostly in discussion mode today, so if you can have your video on during discussions, that would be appreciated. But there's lots of reasons why videos don't always work, so that's totally fine too. But we will start today's meeting with a little bit of just PowerPoint presentation, so you don't have to keep your video on during that. All right. So I'm going to turn it over now to Commissioner Leanne Thompson to give some opening remarks, and then we'll get to the agenda overview.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think I've got two meetings, but I just want to say welcome. I'm going to try and figure out how to do the echo. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so like I said, we're not going to do verbal introductions today, but we'll have a lot of time for discussion, and we'll take breaks as needed throughout the time together we have. So to start today, I'm going to give like a little bit of background setting that hopefully provides some information about how the comprehensive planning process works with our local governments and how the draft public access rules kind of fit into that framework, which hopefully will help a little bit with continuing our discussion on the draft rules. And then we'll spend a little bit of time at the end reviewing the preliminary impact statements that were provided by our consultant on the draft rules. And those things will for sure continue to change and evolve as the rule language itself continues to evolve, because that's really where those impact statements are coming from. And then we'll close out today with just some next steps and the timeline reminder for everyone. Lisa, go ahead.
Just for everybody, Meg, would you like folks to hold off on questions till you get through this first part? Or do you want them to, or are you interested in taking them during?
Yeah, I think either way is fine. Maybe I think like if there's some clarifying questions or like really, really important to that specific topic, please, yeah, go ahead and raise your hand and we can take questions. But just for the sake of time, it might be good to wait until the end so I can get through it. But yeah, certainly if there's like clarifying or just like, I don't understand those words that you just said, yeah, feel free to raise your hand about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. And Lisa or Mandy, if you can just let me know if there's anything in the chat that I should know about. Thank you. Okay, so with that, I'm going to delve into a little bit of context setting for us. So this is obviously going to be a lot of review and old hat for our local government partners here in the room today, but for others, it might not be so familiar. So it just might be helpful to get everyone on the same page. So we here in Oregon, our land use planning program is sort of like oriented around the state and the planning goals there at the high level, but it's really implemented locally through our cities and counties. And that is through the comprehensive plan. And that is tends to be a very large document or several documents that cover a lot of different topics that at least cover all of the statewide planning goals that are relevant to that jurisdiction, but it can go beyond those topics as well. And there usually is some narrative text. So kind of just talking about like, what is this community all about? And, what are the types of development that might be there and things like that. But then there's sections that are about the policies. So these are generally overarching policies that help to kind of steer the plan and the way the city or county wants to move about with development. And some of them can be very general, some of them can be very specific, and some of them can be very targeted to the city or county itself or to permits and applications and things like that. And those policies are based upon inventories, which can include maps. And that is just kind of background information that the policies are based on. And it covers a lot of topics like housing, commercial and industrial lands, natural resources, hazards, things like that. And the inventories can be included directly within the comprehensive plan with the policies themselves or as separate volumes that are referred to by the policy parts of the plan. So in different places, it can look differently. Like smaller cities, usually it's all in one, whereas larger counties or bigger jurisdictions might have multiple volumes. But that's kind of like the basis for the comprehensive plan. And then there might be supplemental and specific plans in there, like the estuary management plan or transportation system plans, community plans, capital improvement plans, things like that, that are kind of part of the overarching comprehensive plan, but are specific to a topic. And then there's the implementing codes. And that's the part where the rubber really meets the road for the local jurisdiction and really is how like an applicant would interact with the regulations when they're coming to apply for a use or activity. And those implementing codes can look a little differently in different jurisdictions, but generally there are zoning regulations, land divisions, definitions, and there might be additional maps. The comprehensive plan is always the overarching regulator if there is any conflict between the comp plan and the implementing codes. But the implementing codes are usually the more specific parts of the plan where the permits are evaluated and how a decision is made. And then since the plans were all developed in about the 1970s or 80s, when the planning program was first implemented, any change that happens after that first initial plan is called a post-acknowledgement plan amendment, and we call them PAPAs, which is a fun nickname. And that happens all the time. So that's a type of amendment to that comprehensive plan and all of those supplemental pieces that changes from the original plan. So it's post-acknowledgement, and there are certain steps that have to be followed when this process occurs. And that is, there's some pre-work that's usually done, and then the initiation of a plan amendment is either led by the city or county themselves, or it can be applicant initiated if a person wants to, for example, change the zoning of their property. There might be an application and fees involved and many meetings and an analysis provided by the staff to say whether this plan amendment does meet all the other parts of the comprehensive plan and is consistent with the other statewide planning goals. There is notice provided to DLCD And that has to be at least 35 days before the first hearing. And then it first goes to the Planning Commission, which is a volunteer body, and they have a public hearing and they provide notice before that. And then they decide, they make a recommendation that will then go to the decision makers. So they're not the decision makers, but they make a recommendation. Then it goes to the City Council or Board of County Commissioners, and the same process plays out there. You have a public notice and a public hearing, and then they make a decision. And then once that decision has been made, there is another notice that's provided to DLCD, and then there's an appeal period. And once that goes through and the appeal period is over, the comprehensive plan is amended and those things become effective. And so I really just want to emphasize that our rules, the way that the development of the coastal public access rules have been developed, is really in this process. It's really in and in particular the pre-work and the development of a coastal public access program, which would be one of those sort of supplemental parts of the comprehensive plan, which would include the inventory, implementing policies, maps, and any implementing codes or measures. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is that DLCD gets notified of these actions, the post-acknowledgement plan amendments. We do not get notified about individual permits. So that's a really important thing to remember. So like I said, we're really kind of focusing in on this idea of a coastal public access program, because that's what is written in the Goal 17 coastal shorelands requirement at this moment. It's roughly what's written here on the screen, that local governments, in coordination with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, shall develop and implement a program to provide increased public access. So a large part of the draft rules are really directed to this, the inventory, map, policies, and implementing code. And they're really focusing on the long-term land use planning and adding more detail to the existing provision. Most comprehensive plans that I've looked through just repeat the exact language of the goal as it's laid out right here. And it's not really clear that they've made a focused effort to develop those coastal public access programs. So that's kind of where the rules kind of are living in that space. Additionally, there are aspects of public access that are outside of the land use planning realm. So we've talked about that a little bit before, but there are lots of things that really we can't get to with this rule or with our authority because they're outside of the land use planning realm. And there might be instances where there are actions happening that the local planning department does not know about. And they might be actions that the city or county is taking themselves, but the local planning department doesn't know about them necessarily. So like could be grading activities, it could be rights of way, it could be other things that are happening that the local planning department just for lots of reasons just doesn't know about because they don't require a land use permit or something like that. So I just wanted to kind of talk about this fine line where we are with the rules about where our authorities are and what can realistically be accomplished through land use planning and those authorities. And so what does it look like to increase public access if that's the goal and that's what we're trying to kind of key into here? And I think it can be really different depending on different situations and what is practical. I've added here the most likely ways to provide increased public access, which would be adding a new site that doesn't already exist or improving existing sites. And I think that one's really important because if you think about a jurisdiction like a city, they might already have identified and be using secondary and primary access points. So secondary being, potentially road ends that don't have any improvements, but people are still using them for public access and they've been identified. So it might be really difficult to identify new sites beyond that for lots of reasons. Like there might not just be any geography left to identify. It could be really dangerous. Like for example, in the city of Depot Bay, where it's all like high cliffs and rocks, where it's really not practical to get down to the shoreline. And so increasing access can be thought about and just by providing improvements so that more people can use that same public access, maybe because there's parking or bathrooms or wheelchairs or Moby mats or things like that that help to provide that increased access. The other thing I wanted to kind of mention is that the rule requirements would really be related to updating the comprehensive plan and update the inventory over time. And then permitting would happen as it already is required to for those kinds of activities, like ground disturbing activities, like building a boardwalk, stairs, paving, and things like that. So the rules really aren't getting at that part of it. It's really about the beginning part in the planning phase. And an inventory on its own is just information. It doesn't really do anything unless it's tied to policy or regulation. And if somebody's goal was just to like find out more about public access points that are provided in a specific area, other entities might be more appropriate for finding that information, because it's unlikely that a person's even going to know where a comprehensive plan lives, let alone be able to find what information is in that hundreds and hundreds of page document to find the public access inventory. And I wanted to share some examples of what this looks like and could look like. So I'm using Clatsop County as our example here because they just did a lot of really great work on this. So this picture on the left-hand side is actually a screenshot of their newly adopted public access inventory. It's not the whole thing, but it's just part of it. And it's really great because this didn't really wasn't there before. And so it's a list of all of their public access sites. And then on the right-hand side is our Oregon's Coastal Public Access Guide for local government planners. And within that guidebook, we do have model comprehensive plan policies. And that's a really great resource for that part of the rules that are related to, now you have to develop some policies and implementing measures related to your inventory. And so we provide a lot of really great examples of that kind of can just be taken off the shelf or customized. But we don't necessarily want to dictate that they have to do certain ones because it might not be appropriate for every jurisdiction, but they can then be able to customize it for themselves. And so again, as a example, here's some taken from Clatsop County's comprehensive plan and some updates that they just made. And they took a lot of that from our model comprehensive plan policies and update it to make sense for their own jurisdiction. The city of Bandon did this as well, and Seaside and Manzanita are working on it right now with the help of Scott, who is also on our rack here. So then just kind of finally, like I said, we're not really focused on the individual permitting as part of this rule generally, but there are a lot of permits out there and they already exist. And there's not only land use permits, but also all sorts of other permits like building and plan amendments and variances and all those kinds of things. And then for land use, we typically have permitted uses, conditional uses, and prohibited uses. And they have various, and obviously prohibited uses would be not allowed, and conditional would be like discretionary decisions, and permitted would be those that are allowed. And like I said, we're just not really getting into this specifics. The exception of that is the rights of way section of the rules, which would apply to an individual action. And we will be talking about that part of the rule today because we didn't really get a chance to talk about it last time. And one thing that I didn't mention in our first meeting, but probably should have, is that there is a separate process with state parks in particular that is under Goal 8, which is our recreational statewide land use planning goal. And there's a separate process for state parks that are within a city or a county and how they do master planning with the city and county and how that gets incorporated into the comprehensive plan and with local permitting and things like that. So we're not touching those rules. Those still exist and they will continue to exist. So it's part of that process. Charlie, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, if there's any resources that you guys have developed around the Goal 8 stuff, I'd be interested in looking at that. I was just looking for that stuff the other day, and it less to do with this process and more to do with some things on the ground. But if you, I don't know if DLCD's developed any resources around that, but I'd appreciate looking at them, or maybe I'll just have a conversation with Parks.
Yeah, we don't really have any resources. The goal itself is really very minimal, and it's mostly about destination resorts. But there is a rule about it, and can be found on our list of all of our rules that are related to land use planning. And I will send you the citation so you know which one to look for.
Yeah, and I think some of it came up with what constitutes exactly a destination resort, but we don't have to get into that now. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Sounds good. Okay. And then lastly, before I get into the rules, I just wanted to share a couple examples about rights of way, which I do think it is important to this part of this rule, and it's not always like super clear what it means. And so I just took a screenshot from an area in Lincoln City. And so you can see in this, the red line just shows the width of the right of way. So the right of way includes the roadway itself, but also the shoulder and the margins of the road. And it can go out beyond the road. So it can go out onto the beach or in other coastal shoreland areas. And if you like, say there was a private developer, and this is just a completely hypothetical situation, but wanted to like develop an addition onto their house or a sidewalk onto their house or something like that and wanted to come into part of their right of way, they could apply for that with the city or the county. And then if they granted it, they could just change the shape of the right of way. And so like this is just a poorly drawn green line, but just shows how it can change the shape, but it would stay providing coastal access across the affected site, which is how it's worded in the goal language. And then another example of that is actually something that did happen in Lincoln County. This is another spot just, I believe, north of Lincoln County or sorry, south of Lincoln County, Lincoln City. And it's this area here is a right of way that provides access onto the beach. And it had been up higher north, but the property owner wanted to redevelop part of the site. And so they applied and they got the right of way just moved slightly to the south. So it still provides access. It's still the same shape, but it is in a slightly different area. So there's lots of ways that this could happen, but I just wanted to kind of show how like rights of way kind of are part of this conversation around public access and how that relates to our Goal 17 rules. Okay, so that's generally it for the background stuff, but I will get into the reorganization of the rule, but I'll pause to see if anyone has questions on any of that I just presented. All right. Feel free to put stuff in the chat too if you have questions that you think of along the way. Okay, so for the rule, hopefully you all got a chance to look at it again. It did change significantly from the rule that we looked at last time. But the organization is fairly similar. And here I just wanted to kind of share how it's changed from that last time. So we still have purpose and definitions, statement of applicability, and then the Coastal Public Access Program, which I just talked about a lot. And that is now 2 subsections versus 3 subsections, which is just inventory and implementation. And then we have the modifying public access sites section, which has 2 subsections now, new sites and rights of way. And so we will start with this section today in our discussion, and we'll have a similar approach to last week or last meeting. Lisa will help facilitate the discussion as we move through and get your thoughts and feedback. And we'll try to go back then through the beginning of the rule again with the definitions section and going from there and see how far we get. I will say that we probably won't spend any time on the inventory requirements as we had a lot of discussion about that last time. And there are pieces that we just can't include because they are not feasible for local governments and they're not really related to the purpose of the comprehensive plan. So we probably won't really talk about that. And then just a few reminders, we're not seeking consensus, but we do want to capture all your thoughts and want to know where you agree and disagree. And not all of the comments will find their way into the rule language. And you can continue to share your written comments and feedback on the draft rules up until the end of the day on February 26th. And we'll talk about that again at the end of today's meeting. But then we'll take a pause until the hearings with our Land Conservation Development Commission in April. And that's another opportunity where RAC members are welcome to testify at those hearings and submit public comment as well. And like I said, we'll talk about that at the end of the meeting today. And just a heads up that we are asking our state agency partners to have a bit of, they're going to be in listening only mode today for the most part, so that we can hear from our non-state RAC members. So we encourage all of you to talk and share your expertise and your thoughts on this, and so we can hear from everyone's different perspectives. And then Lisa, if you have anything to share before we start, I'm gonna switch my screens.
Nope, same process as last time. Feel free to write your questions in the chat. We can read those to Meg if you're not comfortable interjecting or you want to just have it in there as a placeholder. Raise your hands if you have questions so that we can call on you. I don't see anybody on the phone as the only way that they're online, so looks like everybody can access the Zoom controls, so I think we're good to go.
Okay.
When Meg can get everything pulled up. I just want to thank everybody for the last meeting as well. I thought everybody, one, had a lot of great comments, but two, there was just a lot to get through. And what we want to really encourage you is we've got about 1.5 hours. Oh, 2.5 hours. Ooh. We have 2.5 hours, which seems like a long time, but we barely made it through what we did last time in the same amount of time. But we've got a lot less to go through today. But we really want to hear from you. There are no, I'm the worst one to say this because I always say there are stupid questions usually the ones I feel like I'm asking. But there are no stupid questions. If you're thinking it, probably someone else is too. If something doesn't make sense, if there's a word choice that feels like it's out of place, or maybe it's a term of art and you're not familiar with it, and maybe, we can talk through that. But I really encourage everybody to raise your hand if you have comments or to put them in the chat box. Like I said, we'll be monitoring that as well. So we're going to get started, and Meg, if you want to just kick off, can you, now that you don't need navigation, maybe you can close the navigation panel and then they can see any comments that are on the side. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Lisa. And so please, anyone jump in. So we'll start with the modifying coastal public access sites. And this is in the statement of applicability, there is sort of a definition of what modification means, modifying a public access site. And that it would also apply when you're adding a new site to the inventory. So again, I just want to kind of like help people's mind frames of like, this is not like adding a physical new site, but if there was a new site added somehow else outside of this, then there would be a requirement to add that site into the inventory, into the comprehensive plan, so that the comprehensive plan reflects the full reality of the jurisdiction. So that would be like related to the new sites. And then for the sites that are existing, it would be like if they were transferring ownership and they were replacing it with some other site, vacating a right of way for at least part of it, or changing its location. And like an easement may be changed that provided access before but isn't anymore, and there needs to be a replacement. So those kinds of things are what is modifying a coastal public access site. And a clarification that we did add to the language is that it's only for those sites that are within the authority of the local government. So it's not applying to those in federal lands or in state lands. So any thoughts to kick us off, or if anyone wants me to go scroll through certain parts, let me know. Yeah, go ahead, Brock.
Mhm.
Yeah, looking at that first one, is there a reason that private property is excluded from kind of the exemption, the last like exemption sentence there? I know I'm just more looking for clarity on this one because technically that is within their jurisdiction. And I apologize, it's been a busy session, so I'm keeping myself up to speed as best I can, but
Yeah, that is already excluded in the first part of the rule, so it's not here on this section, but in the beginning of the rule, it does say it doesn't apply to private access sites.
perfect, thank you.
Yes, yeah, good point. Thank you. Mandy, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I'm looking at Line 237, the local government made development criteria for determining an acceptable replacement site. I'd really like to see that changed from may to shall, because I feel like how it's written, there won't be like a no net loss of coastal access points. And I know we're balancing the capacity of local governments and taking that into account, but I feel like here it's really crucial to actually ensuring like that coastal access is increasing, not decreasing.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's not about that there is a no net loss basically is the policy of the goal provision. So I think that that already stands, but just the way in which a replacement site can be done, at least we were trying to think like there's a lot of room for creativity like that I have seen local governments use already. And so I don't want to limit that creativity by coming up with criteria ourselves for that replacement. But so like there could be other ways maybe of phrasing that part of it to make that more clear. Um, like, but I see what you're saying though, which is like just that they have to develop some sort of replacement criteria, which is they could, but again, I would just be worried about the ability to lose the creativity because every jurisdiction is so unique.
Yeah, most definitely. I hear that. But yeah, I also wonder like if there's any like very like I don't know broad language to maybe suggest that way they don't have to write it on their own, but also have the flexibility to get creative with it too.
Yeah. Thank you. Charlie?
Yeah, maybe just kind of following up on Mandy's comment there. Like, it seems like the nature of the access matters. Like, is it an emergency access? Is it the only foot trail that exists to this pocket beach? And I think to me, that's where I wonder whether that's captured or not in the consideration or criteria that will be or may be developed in suitable replacement. There's some broadness there that makes me wonder whether or not you might entirely lose an emergency access that's irreplaceable, for example.
Yeah, it's definitely one we've debated a lot already, and it's really tough because like there could be some times in which it like there's no possible way of replacing it because like the whole bank's gone or like it's too dangerous or there's just no like the geography is so challenging. So it's definitely one we've struggled with a lot, and I don't necessarily have a good answer on that one in particular.
Yeah, I think just the nature of the access and what it provides, I think is specific. And there's not a lot of specificity in the replacement. Um, that seems pretty important. Like if I was Parks and Recreation, I would want to make sure I can get my trucks and stuff down onto the beach for emergencies or otherwise. I understand what you're saying though, with respect to the flexibility of the local government and the uniqueness of each site and what they can provide.
So I want to just go ahead and speak on that as well, since I'm part of the local government with a current example of a real life situation that we're dealing with for this exact issue. We currently have a retaining wall at our Susan H. Elmore Park that is part of a kayak launch that provides coastal access, and that retaining wall is currently failing. If it fails, there's going to be a loss of coastal access at that location. And for the city to create a new kayak launch would probably cost $1 million, which we don't have. So replacing the word may with shall would require us to take out a $1 million loan because there's just no funds. I mean, our budget for that most of that stuff comes out of our transient lodging tax, which our budget for that is just very small. And so you're talking about saving up for 10 to 20 years just to replace something that could be taken out through a natural disaster, flooding, things like that. I mean, it's already kind of at the edge, so we're kind of waiting for like the next natural disaster to come in and completely take it out. But yeah, if we were required to replace that, I mean, we're looking at loans in a city that's already cash strapped for other priorities like providing clean water and sewer. So you have to decide, what do the citizen priorities want to be? I know coastal access is very important, but I would think the emphasis would be on clean water and sewer services.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective, Adam. That's important.
Yeah. Hey, Meg, in the chat, there's a comment, instead of using X criteria, local government may develop criteria. I think that that's referencing, you can't see my cursor, line 239. Don, since that's your comment, is that where you're talking about, where?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I thought that was the question, if that's going to be changed to shall. I think this is giving local government the opportunity to use an alternative criteria if they develop it, but there are existing criteria that they would use if they don't choose to develop it.
So you're saying we would provide some criteria and then they could use those or
No, I thought I heard you say that there were criteria.
no, there are
There
no.
are not. Okay, so then I guess I don't understand, what are the criteria if somebody doesn't choose to make it. So I guess I will retract my statement and agree that there should be some.
Yeah, I think we tried to in the first go round, but just like talking with lots of local governments and what they do already, like it's really challenging to come up with like a set that works for everyone. And like given their realities, which like Adam just mentioned, some really important realities, right? Like that there's just certain things that like they have to deal with as local governments. So I think it's just challenging to come up with a list of criteria that can always be applicable for replacement. Brees, go ahead.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
think what's important is that those circumstances actually get attention, and that attention can lead to a shall or a may. So if we maybe look at how might we build into this statement that that attention will be given to the need for a replacement, leading and then call out that it can be this or that. I'm not explaining this very well, but that we put a lens on the circumstances that will be present, and that it's at the local government choice, because I'm hearing $1 million is a lot of money if you're cash strapped. But if you already have something in place, and that $1 million isn't the same threshold, it still is needing to be attended. And I'm wondering if it isn't something that actually may already be pre-existing in that first statement on point 26.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, you're right that first part, that I mean, that's basically directly from the goal language now. And so that is an existing requirement. So generally at this moment in time, like whether we have these rules or not, local governments have to replace sites. They can never lose the amount of sites they provide. There's no, details, right? Like of what that looks like or what that actually means, and if there's a time frame and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that already exists. So
Okay.
I think, Brees, if what you're saying though is like, what are the different circumstances that replacement could happen under?
Yeah, the point, Adam's example is a real world example. But there may be other examples that don't get that level of scrutiny. The point being, in Adam's example, it got looked at and an answer was asked and answered. So there's a conscious path forward in decision making. It's not we'll let nature take care of it.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah. It's like, what are the circumstances, and like if it's just negligence versus like we as a community, we were like, it's more important to provide clean water and sewer than to provide this kayak access at this point in time. So we're going to prioritize that.
Yeah, that's better said. Thank you.
No, that's great. No, I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah, I think maybe Brees got at it a little bit, or you got there. I think the nature of why it's being replaced is important. I will recognize that the word climate change does not exist anywhere in this rule. The word climate does not exist, but the sea level rise is real. We're going to have changing circumstances on our coastline. I don't believe that anybody's in direct control of that at this point in time. A lot of the cat's out of the bag, so to speak, with climate change and that stuff. So, I do think the nature of why it's being replaced matters. I also think that, cash strapped, while I completely sympathize and empathize for what we're talking about, cash strapped and money, I don't know if is the necessary answer. A local government may have the will of the voters to choose not to pass taxes to bond out certain public utilities that are necessary. And therefore, we're trading things based on politics locally, statewide land use values. So I think that situation's real, and it may not be replaceable. But I would hate for us to just lose a lot of types of public access over time because the seas are rising and we're not. And not recognize that there needs to be some criteria on either end of that, the nature of the use and the nature of the loss. So I'll give you another example. If somebody wants to build a resort, I mean, that's a very private interest in an area or very development housing type interest in an area. Privatized interest in an area could really drive, such as in the public right-of-way examples, could drive a change like that. So it seems like the nature of why it's being replaced matters. What's driving that change? And so you have criteria on both sides of that. What was the use of it? What was the use? And so in some cases, maybe replacing a kayak might not be like, you know, uh, potential, but in some circumstances, we may want to go out of our way to replace an emergency access because we know the nature of that beach, we know the nature of that shoreline, we know how dangerous it could be, um, and we know that we save lives there regularly with emergency access. So I do think that that's, I don't want to go on and on, but my point here is I do think that the nature of loss and then the nature of the access are very important in this replacement or not replacement space.
Okay. Thank you, Charlie. Do you feel like you've captured that, Meg?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Mandy, then Jean.
Thanks. Yeah, just saying I love Bree's idea and I agree with what Charlie was saying about the nature. Meg, you said recently that no net loss is implied, but I'm wondering if it should be explicitly stated somewhere. That way the details on how to like implement this, how to make this happen, are just kind of up to the local government who knows the area best and knows what, their community and beaches need. But then going back on that, I also wonder if there could be a provision that says, like, when looking at like a replacement site or a new site, to kind of prioritize areas or sites that are more resilient to erosion and flooding, just kind of looking more long term. Because yeah.
Yeah, I think that might actually be more appropriate in the other part of this, the like coastal public access program. Like, and that would be like a policy that the city or county could adopt about like where they're prioritizing locations. So I'm gonna make a note here, but I will move it up later.
Jean?
All right, thanks. I think I may be saying quite a few things that Bryce and Charlie already said too, but I just wanted to give my voice in on that. Bryce said level of scrutiny for, could you go up a little bit?
Yeah, hold on one second.
Okay, thanks.
Oops,
And the conscious path forward to retain or replace these accesses, that's extremely important. And I think we should continue that way. The question of water versus sewer versus police versus streets versus parks is going to be ongoing for all time. But we have a chance here to say, let's not lose what we have. And if we are going to have to lose it, there's got to be a really good reason for it. And not only from my perspective of a coastal a central coast town that's small, is having public access, but also having emergency access. And for years, my city deferred maintenance on these right of ways and public easements. And we've learned the hard way that we can't do that. We need to retain and replace it. So I think this is the time for us to really make that clear here. Just that there has to be a level of scrutiny and that we have to continue with the replacement or retainment of them.
Yeah, I hear all of this. I think one of the things we've struggled with is like, how do they know this is even happening? Like, because we're talking about land use here, and those things might be happening in different departments, and there might not be a land use permit required for some of those things. I mean, maybe for some, but not for all. It could be happening like with tax assessment. It could be happening like, you know what I mean? So like, how do we get at that? Like, how do we actually require that?
I mean, I think, Meg, you are requiring it there with what you're saying.
But how would they know that, I guess? Like,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
I wrote this in this note here that like there is a statute that says like local governments can apply statutes and rules directly without like having to update their comp plan or codes or whatever. But the problem is that they would have no way of knowing that. Like, and we don't have any say over permits. Like I said before, the only thing we know is happening is a plan amendment. So if somebody was coming in with a plan amendment and we're like, oh, did you know about this rule? You have to comply with this rule. So it's an avenue to like make them aware of something. But what I'm saying is here's where I'm struggling with like, what is the avenue so they know they have to make that decision about why is a site being why is the site being changed at all? Like, who knows that and who's making those decisions?
Well, can I say something really quick before Adam gets on? I know that, so we have 29 now, public beach accesses under Lincoln City jurisdiction. And anytime that we go anywhere past the vegetation, we have got to connect with OPRD. So we work with our Central Coast Manager, Creason, who tells us what we can and can't do. And he's stopped us a lot of times from doing improvements that we thought were great, but he's like, no, this needs to be a natural environment. Please do not put, river rock or something like that down there. So wouldn't that be the opportunity for?
Not if it's only within the city's jurisdiction. Like if it doesn't go out onto the ocean shore at all, then there would be
you're right. Yeah.
There'd be no need for a permit from parks or something like that. I guess I mean maybe in some cases you would know, and so that would be fair. But there still would be a requirement though if we said like you need to make this in your findings for modifying a site, blah blah blah. You have to like address all these criteria. That would also require their comprehensive plan to be amended in some way, shape, or form. And we've sort of, our charge as the Rulemaking Advisory Committee from our commission has been to make sure that this is as low bar for local governments to comply with as possible, right? Like we don't want to provide an unfunded mandate. And so if our rule does actually make that every single city and county in the coast has to make a comp plan change, that's a huge lift and we have no money to do that. So I do just want to like that. I have to emphasize that is like a big part of our charge and our rulemaking is that we can't create an unfunded mandate for local jurisdictions. So that's a struggle too, with just like how this is going to get implemented. But Adam, go ahead. You've been patient. You're on mute. You're on mute, Adam.
Sorry, I was thinking and not unmuting myself.
No worries.
I was just going to say a couple things that might alleviate some concerns that Mandy and others have had. And that is that for the cities that are along the coast or near the coast, in the case of Tillamook, it is in our best interest to provide coastal access because it attracts tourism dollars, which is important for the tax revenue base. The problem just comes in when we're required to do things because then it's like, okay, well, is there going to be fines if we don't get this done in time? So, for example, I've been here for 2 years now, and when I came in, the ball was dropped on a regulation similar to this one, where nobody was doing it because the city didn't have a project manager or a licensed engineer on board to make sure that the proper reports were being filed. And so we were, weeks away from getting a financial hit to us in the terms of fines because we hadn't submitted a report. So I will say though, to I think it was Gene's point, if you do want a city to do something, attach fines to it because it will become a priority. Now, do I want that? No, I don't want that. But if this was a priority that you guys definitely want to make sure is done, then fines would be one way to do it because we take loans in order to make sure we avoid fines. But it would be a big hit, like Meg said, to have to go through all the lifting on the planning side to come up with these comprehensive plans, especially when we're still working on, I don't know if you guys know this, but we're still working on the housing mandate from Tina Kotek because we're required to provide a certain amount of additional housing units. So there's just a lot coming down the pipeline right now, and that's all I'll say about that. But it is in the city's interest to make sure that we always provide coastal access and it doesn't just fall by the wayside if we did have something like a retaining wall collapse and there's no kayak launch for a couple years.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think that's a really important point, and I've heard that throughout too. It's really in the best interest of the city or county to provide public access, and so they're not trying to get rid of them for sure. It's not a goal. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. So let me just speak to Adam's point because as a county commissioner, I'm about to have a stroke here. Rather than just saying fines, could we look at support as well as sanctions? Because we really are balancing human life and safety in a variety of ways. So we don't want to just punish people into submission. There's only so much people can do given limited resources. So let's have supports, let's have carrots. Absolutely look at what needs to happen and why it needs to happen and categorize, rank the priorities so that there is some clear and reasonable use of criteria. But don't just jump to fines, although what he's saying is absolutely true. Thank you. About the, to avoid punishment, that's an imperative, but we'd rather support people with clear guidelines, I think, than just jump to punishment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adam, did you have a follow-up or can we move on to Scott?
Sorry, I keep forgetting to put my hand down on all these meetings.
That's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I just was looking at 28 and I was thinking about the unfunded mandates and I'm thinking about, updating the inventory, with the new location of replacement. And my mind went to, well, is there a time requirement there? Does it need to be done within a year, 2 years, or is it simply as stating something like when the comp plan's updated next? And I think that's mostly because I'm concerned about doing a comp plan amendment essentially when you're doing this change, which, as you mentioned, is not an easy thing to do for some small communities. It takes multiple meetings and public noticing. So just trying to think through, what's that requirement and when that updates would be required.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I had thought about that too. Sometimes leaving things vague can be helpful, but yeah, like during the next update was kind of what I was.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah.
Meg, there
Yeah.
there are some comments over here that were following the conversation around fines and some of the challenges municipalities had, and generally don't support fines for infractions of retaining public access. Just so you know that.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. And there was this last one, the formatting got weird on it, but if a coastal public access site is lost, the local government shall strive to repair or replace the lost site as soon as practical. So that's like kind of getting at that idea of like, if there is a site being lost because of erosion or flooding or things like that, that are outside of the local government's control, then they would try to replace it over time. But obviously the language is shall strive, which is, pretty wiggly, I would say, but that's intentional. Because there's lots of things that could be challenging about that, as we've just talked about. But that's kind of related to, I think, a lot of the discussion we've just had, in addition to the other part up further, which is about finding a suitable replacement site. Or just, I think also the big takeaway that I've heard is like, why is the access being lost in the first place? Like, is it being redeveloped? Is it being eroded? What is the reasoning behind it? And then how can we replace it in a thoughtful, meaningful way? So we have some work to do there, I think. So let's maybe move on to this next section, which is new coastal public access sites. So again, this is just like adding it to the inventory, as we just kind of talked about what Scott brought up, like doing a plan amendment essentially to add a new site to the inventory. Not necessarily the construction of that site, like that would take place separately through existing permitting pathways, but just like making sure the inventory continues to remain up to date. And so we could do a similar kind of wording at the next plan amendment that happens to be happening through that local jurisdiction. They could add this in as like a part of that process, or just the next time they get to that. And so really it's just adding the inventory, and then that they must coordinate with the entities that we've outlined earlier. So those would be like Oregon Parks and Recreation Department of State Lands, the tribes, Department or the Oregon State Marine Board, and those that we outlined already in the previous section. And then that those new sites would have the same inventory information as as is required in the earlier section as well. So that's kind of the main gist of the new sites. Any thoughts, questions on that part? Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
Sorry, too many questions.
Don't be sorry. That's what we're here for.
Where, and maybe these are in Parks master planning, but where does Parks keep their inventory of potential new sites, access sites?
Like the ones that they would
Acquisition?
like to develop, you mean?
Yep, either acquisition or otherwise. And what I'm getting at here is that back to the incentives piece is that these coastal access points, they benefit everybody in the state of Oregon. Many times they're actually serving another agency who might be in charge of emergency response or ocean shore management. And so I'm just curious if there's a way to align opportunities for, and I'm not, maybe not under this administration, but NIF-WIF type grants that would allow local governments to pursue not just the access itself, but the actual comprehensive planning that they would need to do for that.
Yeah, I think that's our hope in that first part in the like public access program piece that we talked about last meeting. And with the coordination that would happen with those entities is that would be an opportunity to discover those sites, those opportunities for improvements or additions. So I think that kind of is already built into the previous section. But Laurel's here. I don't know if Laurel, if you want to speak to anything.
That's also my
related to-
ignorance for not watching the rest of the last meeting, so I
Oh, it's
apologize.
okay. No worries.
But
Maybe we'll get to it again if we have time today. But so yeah, keep that in mind. Yeah, Laurel, did you want to chime in at all?
There were so many questions, and answers
I
to all
think
those
maybe
questions could
one
take the whole meeting,
that
probably.
I would distill it would be like, does Parks have like a list of potential areas to improve over time as access?
They are in our individual park master plans identified potentially, but those don't include all of the ocean shore outside of a park. And a park master plan is done when development of the upland park is needed. The Ocean Shore Management Plan is another venue for that, and it does have some of that information in there. It is several years old, but that is a potential place where that could be explored for updates to a coastwide, from a coastwide perspective.
Yeah.
But it's not the same mechanism as a master plan. It doesn't have the same triggers with
Right.
the goal language.
Okay, thank you. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought this might be helpful because we're working through this right now in Seaside, doing the comprehensive plan update. And one of the things that we're doing as part of the inventory is, you mentioned, Meg, is identifying potential new sites. So that could be a way, if you have those potential new sites adopted in your comp plan, you could point to that when you're applying for a grant as things that have already been identified in an adopted plan. So from the city side, that could be a helpful way to kind of move those potential future sites forward and getting funding for them.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Hey, Meg, there was some agreement in the chat about that, but also this isn't necessarily specific to this section only, but if you just want to capture somewhere in case we lose these comments. The question was, well, the statement was wondering how nonprofits or volunteer can lend capacity to local governments for developing the access inventories or other implementing measures with this. Oh, I lost Meg. Are you there? Okay.
I'm still here.
There might be some way to include some language that allows for outside assistance within some of this, or to encourage it to reach out to folks.
Yeah, I would say that's never precluded, right? Like that
Yeah,
certainly does happen in lots of places already through the public process. And I think the way that we've directed that first part of the rule to have that early coordination would help with that, but we could identify some additional language potentially to encourage that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Brees.
Thank you. Yeah, kind of dovetailing that, I think. My comment is more about expectation management. Because there may be a desire and oh yeah, we'll just use an area at some future point for our access. But there may be well-established historically understood rationales for why it wasn't used. And that may be everything from, it may be a known archaeological site or sensitive species. And I guess where I'm going with this is that the expectation management so that when there is that coordination with the other entities, that may come out and something that had been planned for or anticipated may find a dead end.
Mm-hmm.
So building that into place, and it may find its way in a very practical way as their mitigation. That may be in a very specific cultural resources mitigation or mitigative actions for the protection and erosion or pedestrian volume.
Mm-hmm.
That's just an example. So thanks.
Yeah, I think that's good examples. I think some of that is, if I'm not mistaken, in the cultural areas rule. I know you were part of that rulemaking.
It is, and that's also where this is coming from, is if we can help it a little crosswalking with
Yeah.
the expectation. I think that helps everybody in being planful.
Yes, it is a really important point, and I mean, it's outside of the point you just made, which is really important, that like the mitigation of a particular site area. So that is important. We should integrate that in. But the other point being that the coordination with this other rule that just was adopted on cultural areas under Goal 5. Let's talk about that maybe after we get through this section, because yeah, I think it's really important, and we can spend some time talking about that. Okay, so anything else, sorry, before we move on to rights of way, anything else people wanted to add for new coastal access sites? Okay. Move on to rights of way. And so this is the part of the rule that has maybe more applicability on like an individual kind of action, because it is so specific in the rule, in the goal language already. So the part of the goal says that a right of way that provides public access to the coastal shoreline can't be vacated unless access across the affected site is retained. And that's it, right? So that's that's what it says. And that is clear, but also vague. And what is, I think, interesting about this one is rights of way. The vacation of rights of way is not usually a land use decision. So again, we have that problem of not necessarily having the planning department know about this. And how do you like make that connection? And there are ways we could, but it would potentially provide a lot of more work for local governments. So that's just kind of a bigger question maybe. But in the meantime, sort of the way that we've crafted this language is about how you retain public access across the affected site. So like that's what the language says in the goal. And so that's what we're trying to like give some detail to. And we've, with the help of Parks, who has been really helpful in providing some comments on the rule language, we put this clause in that it doesn't apply to the parts of rights of way that extend onto the ocean shore, because as we saw in that example, rights of way can go out far, right, beyond where the jurisdiction of the city or the county may be. And there is the beach bill that applies in that area, that is the ocean shore, and in that case, rights of way can't be vacated at all because they're providing access. So we're just kind of talking about that the upland part here, and not the part that connects with the ocean shore. And really, essentially, what it's saying is that the rights of way can't be vacated unless they keep access available. And local governments have been creative in this one as well, kind of depending on the situation. And I don't necessarily want to squash that creativity because it is a difficult thing to do. So it's not, there's not a lot to this part of the rule, but there's a lot to it in the real world, I guess. So, any thoughts? There is, I guess the other thing I wanted to say is there is a statute that is already talks about the vacation of right-of-ways. And it also has a provision in it that says that local governments may use those statutes for their own purposes, or they could have their own rules about the vacation of right-of-ways. So we also have to be a little bit careful here too, I think, about what is our authority and what is really up to the local government to decide. Mandy, go ahead.
Thanks for that context and background. Still absorbing that while I'm forming my comment, but I think my comment is building off of Charlie's point, like how can we maintain the same type of access, whether it's like, if it before you could walk to the beach using that, and then maybe a property owner is like, oh, now it's visual access, like you can look across the property. So just like how the access point is being used matters. So yeah, I don't know if it's just like the idea if it's put in there, or if that could be actually written in there meaningfully and still gives local governments the ability to judge situation by situation.
Do you think this part would get that was my intention anyway, is to get at that by saying that retained public access must provide sufficient public access to the same water body as was provided prior to?
I think that's great, but I think it's a different thing because it's like the type of access. So like whether you could walk to it, whether like it was like an emergency access, or whether it was just like visual access.
Yeah. Yeah, because the presumption here, I think, is that if these things can't be met, then it can't be vacated, right? Like that's the outcome. The question, I think, is for our local government partners here, is making the vacation of a right-of-way that provides coastal public access into a quasi-judicial land use decision, because that's not what it is right now, from my understanding. And so that would be a change, and potentially also, like I said before, cause there to be changes to the comp plan and code to be able to meet that requirement. So yeah, question for our local government partners, if you have any thoughts on that. But yeah, Charlie, go ahead.
No, let the local government folks speak on that first.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I was just thinking about the street vacation, and I think you're right. It's not a quasi judicial land use decision, but it does have to be approved by city council. It's my understanding, because I've done them before. So it already is a process. So I don't think that that's too much of a burden from a city government perspective, because I don't believe there would be additional meetings. Because you are, like you said, you already have to go through. I don't think you have to go through planning commission, but I do know it's a council decision. So that would be the difference, I think, is that it would go through planning commission and have different set of noticing requirements. But I think I don't see that as a huge issue, but I'd like to hear other officials who might have other thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's my understanding too, is it still goes to the city council or the county commissioners, but it wouldn't go through the planning commission. Jeannie, I saw you come on camera. Do you have any?
I was just going to agree with it. I'm not concerned with that from a city perspective.
Yeah. Thank you. What about you, Mary?
All right, Adam.
Sorry, looking for my audio. Yeah, I agree with that as well. At least that's how Rockaway is.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. That's helpful. Okay. Well, Charlie, why don't I go back to you then?
I think I understand the purpose of the same water body as it relates to inland. I'm a beach person though, so I'm always thinking about the beach and the ocean, and I'm not quite sure I understand coastal shoreland area as was provided. Um, I mean, someplace like Rockaway might have a pretty continuous sort of opportunity that all seems like the same coastal shoreline area. I would argue that other places like Coos County or even Lincoln County has a lot of unique access points that one may believe it's the same shoreline area or not. So I'm specifically thinking about developments where upland right-of-ways and land gets privatized around two headlands and could exclude a coastal shoreland. So just it seems like there may be some more specificity to that, just to make sure that it's actually a comparable access.
Do you have any suggested language?
No, because I'm like thinking off my hip right now, which makes me very not useful. I apologize.
That's okay. More specificity, I think was sure. Okay. Okay. Thank you. This is all very helpful. Okay, so why don't we go back up then, if people are okay with that? Actually, how about this? How about we take a break
Yes.
for 10 minutes and then come back to the beginning of the rules? Thank you all. So we'll come back at like 2:30. Let's just say 2:30. Thank you. All right, as the people come back, if you can put your cameras on so I know that you're back. Thank you. All right, great. Thanks for coming back, everyone. Hope you got a nice little break away from your screen. So I think we'll start now with definitions, which I'm sure is the most thrilling part of any meeting, but is very important. Okay, so can you all see my screen okay? Great, okay, thank you. So the rule starts out with a purpose statement, and it's a pretty straightforward one, hopefully, for this rule, which is just that it's carrying out the requirements of implementation requirement 6 of goal 17. And then we have a list of definitions which would apply to the rule. It includes all the definitions that are already within our state's land use statute, which is 197, and then the statewide planning goals, and then we have the additional definitions. And as I noted, the definitions that are in the blue highlight are new and could be changed, revised, and the ones that are not highlighted are ones that already exist somewhere, and so they're not really able to be edited. And some of them are from the statewide planning goals, but are repeated here because it hopefully helps to have the definition nearby, especially if it's used in the rule, so that it's easier to reference. So, for example, coastal lakes is defined in the statewide planning goals, but is also used here a little bit because it helps identify areas that are coastal shorelands. So that's just an example. So we have a couple here. I'll note that a couple ones that are new from the last time that we all met together. Coastal resources was added, and we had talked about it as a natural resource or natural resources before within the rule, but we had some comments that was maybe too vague. And so coastal resources felt like a better fit, and so I added a definition there. And then inclusivity feature, I think we had a discussion about that last time as well. So added that to the list. And then the other one, and tribe, I added the definition of tribe, which mimics the Goal 5 cultural areas rule that was just adopted. So that is in there as well. Does anyone have any thoughts related to any of these definitions at the moment? I mean, we could come back to them later too, but yeah, go ahead, Erica.
Just on a accessibility feature, I would recommend changing the last sentence where it says handicap parking spaces to disabled parking spaces. Handicap is not the term that is most inclusive at this time, and I know we edited some other DLCD materials to get rid of that word and replace with disabled parking spaces.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. Does the definition, Erica, seem good otherwise from your perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I appreciate that it says meet or exceed the Americans with Disability Acts too. I think that's really important.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mandy, go ahead.
Hi. I'm wondering under the definition for coastal resources, if like cultural, spiritual, recreational, I'm wondering if those resources should be listed under there. I know it's kind of focusing on the physical aspects, but
yeah, it's potentially. I mean, I think if it implies sort of you need to inventory those things potentially. we do have a separate one for cultural areas. But yeah, can you list those things again?
Yeah, I was just thinking like coastal resources, like to me, like that's recreational, spiritual, cultural. But I guess this kind of just focuses on like what's actually there, not like what people do there. But I think it could still be relevant.
Yeah, I think it depends on how the term is used in the rule and whether that is important to the rule or not. And I think it's mostly around like avoiding or minimizing impacts too. And while those things could be impacted, I think it would be hard to measure potentially of like what is the impact to your emotional resource by changing a public access point.
Yeah, I was going to say recreation could be pretty easy to measure.
Yeah, recreation could be.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. Brees, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that intangibles are important to identify because through a blinded lens for tribes, a lot of those concerns are intangible, the spiritual, the feeling of a place, etc. Those are actually, there are measures for them set forth in National Historic Preservation Act, the feeling of a place, the quality of a place, etc. So there are points of reference that can be borrowed from.
Okay. That's good to know. Thank you.
Brees, I'm sorry, Meg.
Yeah, go ahead.
Brees, that's all great, but not but. How do you feel though about them being broken out? So you have coastal resources with a more physical piece, then you've got cultural areas. Do you feel like they should all be pulled under one, or is it okay that we've separated them out for clarity's sake in the rule?
I was hoping to sidestep that.
Oh, sorry, Brees.
No. I think that it is important, and I think that actually them residing under point D rather than just being shoehorned under H allows for a breadth of qualitative elements that all may invest in, not just a tribe cultural value, but a tribe could still utilize that placement of those intangibles under D. I guess where I'm going is if you make it only a tribal spiritual place, you're at risk of exclusion. But if you don't put it in someplace, then you also run a risk of being even further exclusionary. Whereas I do like H being in here because of the goal 5 language that is quite specific, and that's what I'm seeing here is H is a direct reference to goal 5 revised rule.
Yeah, so I might have misheard you then. So like keeping them separate is good, but maybe also include more things in D. Like the list of examples could be further developed. Okay. So I'm going to take this off, but thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you. Well, Brees and I just spent quite a bit of quality time together, I would say, working on the goal 5, where we explored at length differing definitions and perceptions about feeling. the access and the control of the access were sticking points. I was just thinking to myself, always a bad time, right? Wow, this is really fun because we haven't got at cross purposes with one another. In the same way that we had to resolve in those the Goal 5 cultural artifact discussion. And it is both archaeological sites, cultural artifacts, and cultural landscapes. And cultural landscapes gets very sticky because it is whose perception. I have neighbors who do myriads of mischief in order to protect their feeling of the place that they call home.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's with great respect and affection, I would say, maybe holding back on some of this, or at least carefully considering what are the clear and objective standards. Because absent those clear and objective standards, we get into people's feelings and perceptions about what they should have control over, whether it's directly or indirectly through rules. I just want to urge some caution and thoughtful consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Other thoughts on the other definitions? Brock.
Just gonna throw a +1 on the Commissioner Thompson's comments there. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a couple things in the chat, Meg.
Yeah.
Someone mentioned they weren't familiar with Goal 5. Is it restricted to archaeological sites or other cultural resources? And then could cultural resources be a separate definition than coastal resources and separate? Oh, could cultural resources be a separate definition than coastal resources and separate than cultural areas? So could there be a cultural resource definition as well? Is that what you're asking, Charlie?
I think it depends on if it's actually it's not, I don't think that's a term that's used in the rule.
Yeah, it's not.
But it would be if you added that. I can spend a little time talking about the overlap with Goal 5, because that would probably help as we continue this conversation. But Charlie, if you want to give voice to anything in the chat, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the cultural area is distinctly different than the use and the value, and I was just trying to think to that a little bit more, and I can think of some examples. I'm really not the best to inform on this though, as a non-cultural tribal member, so I was just trying to think about how to separate that the area from the actual use or value. Really getting at some of these intangibles, but in maybe a more measurable way.
Yeah, it just kind of depends on what's in the rule itself and whether it's a term that needs to be defined. So this is something we could come back to as we continue through the rule language.
That's what I was thinking is like, do we want to have a placeholder here to see if we're running into this?
Right.
And I think it takes not my eye, but another's.
Thank you. Adam, go ahead.
Yes, if you don't mind scrolling up a little bit.
Sure.
To line 24, where we were talking about the ADA standards. There was just one thing I wanted to add in there for clarity. And what I would add is at the time of construction after sites. And the reason why I think it's important to note that this is going to meet or exceed ADA standards at the time of construction
Yeah.
is because you may not know, but the ADA standards they change over time. You know, for engineers like myself, it used to be I think it was 8.5% slope on curb cuts, and now we have to meet 7.5% slope. So we have a lot of curb ramps that don't necessarily meet current ADA standards, but they were accepted at the time of construction according to the standards that were present at that time. So I just would like to put that clarifying statement in there.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a good one. And because this is again, like we're doing long-term planning for the most part in here. And so those things could change and change and change before there's any actual construction happening in a particular area.
Yeah. I know some people may feel differently, but from an engineer's perspective, having to rip out a ramp just over a 1% slope difference is frustrating, especially when you already have a limited budget.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, so I'll just talk a little bit about my understanding of the crossover with the Goal 5 cultural areas rulemaking that just completed, which was many years in the making. And I'm not the expert, so I'll speak to what I know and how it overlaps with this. So DLCD recently adopted some new rules under Goal 5, which is the goal for natural resource areas. And it is a little bit of a kitchen sink goal. I would say that it puts a lot of things together and they don't always necessarily drive. Like mineral resource extraction is also within there, for an example, as well as historic sites. And there are a lot of implementing rules for it, and for the most part, for all the different like categories of resources. But there's not one for cultural areas, which is identified in the goal, but has never had an implementing rule for. And so it now has one, and it will go into effect on January 1st, 2027. And there are a lot of different pieces of it, but one thing that I learned recently from the expert Amanda Punton, who is the person who led it for DLCD, it has a lot of triggers for different types of permits at the local level. But one thing it doesn't have a notice for is plan amendments, and this rulemaking is really about plan amendments for the most part. So there is sort of like actually like a bit of a dichotomy between the rules in that this is mostly about plan amendments and that's really about permitting for ground disturbing activities for the most part. And so there's not really overlap from that perspective. The other thing that kind of complicates things a little bit is in one of the implementing rules of Goal 5, there is a section that says that for the natural resource areas that overlap between Goal 5 and the coastal goals supersede, the requirements of the coastal goals supersede those of Goal 5. And there can be overlap for Goal 17 for sure, between Goal 5 and Goal 17, which is coastal shorelands. And I know it's hard, but it's like these goals are very spatial in their application. So there is this bit of overlap. So to that end, when I talked with Amanda last week about it, we added a new part to the statement of applicability that I'm scrolling to now, and it says that coastal public access sites are considered natural resources. And that would mean that when there's that part of the implementing rule that says where these things overlap, the Goal 17 requirements would supersede those of Goal 5. For this rule, this would be the implementing rule, basically. And those areas for Goal 5 would be subordinate to this one. And we think that would probably be the cleanest way, although we could discuss other ways of doing that, because they're not really trying to do the same thing. They're different things. But I think what's important is that we have, if there's any part of that rule that we think is really important to this rule, then we should include it in this rule. So I'll probably really look to Brees and Commissioner Thompson to help us with that, because you guys have that. You've been on that rack and you've been in that conversation more than me. I'm I'll continue to keep doing research and thought on this for sure. But yeah, that's kind of my understanding of things. And I know that was probably very complex to everyone. But yeah, it's definitely a nuance that we need to just be thoughtful about. Commissioner Thompson, go ahead.
Thank you. And I appreciate the confidence. Commissioner Thompson is going to lean on Brees because, you know what I mean? He has a focused attention on this issue and a duration of experience. I'm a rookie I've done other things, but his clarity and his experience in this really informed our discussion. And I didn't mean to leave Brock out because Brock was also part of that discussion.
Oh, great.
So
Oh, good. Good.
they're like the balancing points for me. I try and cover the spectrum by defining the balancing points, and they're it. So both of them have paid very close, extensive attention to this, and I'm grateful to be part of that with them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, Brees, go ahead.
Yeah, and I really want to call out, I appreciate how you've identified one is about a permitting and one is the other process. Because I think that's an important distinction as we step into this. But to the commissioner's observation, I think there is still room in here to put in intent or some sort of intent statement that though it is necessary to for a prioritization of goal 17 in this space, that the intent for places of cultural significance on the landscape still can be considered, so that it's not about an or necessarily an easy quote or choice. It's let's make a consideration of, is there room for this to be an and?
Yeah, so they could both apply, really.
Yeah. And that they can stand next to each other and not be diametrically, in opposition. So that's my suggestion in this space, so that we still stay in the bounded realm that we are.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's a question I'll put to our DOJ, to be honest, because I think it's something that we'll need to figure out is because I agree with you. I think both should be able to be in place. It doesn't have to be an and or, they can live happily together. But yeah, how do we make that work in the language? So that's some homework that I'll have. So more to come on that. Okay, so how about we go back up then to the statement of applicability, because we didn't really talk about this yet as a group. And it is important. So this is where the rules apply and where they don't apply. So I'll just let you all kind of scroll through or read through it if you can, but if you have, thoughts or questions that come to mind, please share. It's all perfect. Any local governments have any thoughts? Does this feel like something you could do? You understand? All right, we'll keep going then. Okay, so now we're going to start repeating what we've talked about before, but obviously things have changed since the last time. So this is the Coastal Public Access Program, which is identified in the goal already as something that local governments need to be doing to provide increased public access. And we're thinking of that public access program as like a whole package. It's the inventory and maps, as well as comprehensive plan policies and any implementing code measures that might be needed. And that those last two things, the policies and the code, is really meant to be, at the moment anyway, pretty flexible. But the inventory is where there's more guardrails about what is to be included. So the first part is really just saying, like, this is what the public access program is, and what increasing public access means. But I did have a question of, like, are there other scenarios that people can think of that would qualify as increased public access besides adding a new site or improving an existing site? Yeah, Mandy, go ahead.
The only thing I could think of is I'm sorry, I had an idea, then I just lost it. Basically, like so like not having to do with like the specific access point, but once you've reached that coastal site that the access point grants, ensuring that you can walk along the edge of it for longer. So like no riprap getting in the way. Yeah, cutting off coastal access points laterally along the beach.
Yeah, I think that it's a really important one, for sure. It's hard for a local government, I think, because it's on jurisdiction that's not theirs. But it's in our model policies for local governments to consider, and some of them have adopted it, is like around using that as a consideration in individual shoreline stabilization permits, like that consideration for like how that project impacts public access on that beach or estuary or whatever it might be. So yeah, that is an important point. But I don't know if I could put it in here, but maybe somewhere else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And then the requirements of this is to adopt the program into their comprehensive plan, and that it has to have the inventory, associated maps, plan policies, and related implementing ordinances and development codes. They have to coordinate with the following entities, which we discussed last time. And then I did add this new one from some comments that coordination with these entities should be close to the beginning of development of the Coastal Public Access Program, and continue that coordination. And then if there is no response from those entities or a decline to coordinate, within 60 days of receiving the request, the local jurisdiction may continue to move forward. So that's a question too about that 60 days. Is that enough time? Not enough time? This is a plan amendment process, so there are no strict timelines with it like there would be for an individual permit decision. So there could be longer lead times, but also don't want the process to stop. So just if anyone has any thoughts on this coordination piece, feel free. A thumbs up. Cool.
Meg, there is a comment that maybe doesn't need to be addressed today, but just to put it in your little nugget in the back of your mind. It says coordination with state agency is specifically stated as a requirement when adding new sites, but it is not required when modifying an existing site. Should coordination with relevant state agencies be specified for modifying a site in 24 through 28 as defined in subsection 6? So just something to have.
Yeah, I mean, we had it before, but now we've taken it out because the modification section has really condensed into just updating the plan after the fact. So like that coordination should primarily actually be happening when that modification is happening through permitting, but that's not what this rule is about. It's about like adding the site to the inventory of the comp plan. So there doesn't really feel like a need for coordination at that point because it's just like a cleanup action, basically. So that's why that change happened. Okay. Bruce, go ahead.
Thanks. Can you go back? Just wanting to clarify. So on point F is tribes, but on your 60-day and your coordination, is it in?
Oh, I think it must have just not been updated with all of my changes, but yeah, it should be A through F. Or even A through G, really. A through G.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. I'm just making sure tribes aren't excluded from that. Perfect.
Yes,
Thanks.
good catch. Yeah. Yeah, I've tried to like highlight all these number things, which I haven't always been good about catching because they change constantly. So I have to keep going back to fix them. Yeah, so good catch. Thank you.
And if I can, just for clarification, it'll be the consultation or coordination with the tribes identified by LCIS, not LCIS being the coordinator of those tribes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, it is the language that matches from the Goal 5 rule. I just took that. Does that seem okay?
Yeah, I'm just, for those who may be listening, who don't have that experience.
Yeah.
That's what it means.
Yeah. And my understanding is that LCIS is working on those lists now and will have them ready by the time the rule goes into effect, which is January 1st, 2027. And so that's something I wanted to talk about with this rule too, is the effective date and whether maybe we should match it with the Goal 5 cultural areas rule effective date for ease of, for lots of reasons, potentially, but that could be helpful for that purpose too, because they will be providing that list by that time. Okay. So that's good. I'm appreciative of everyone's comments to get us to that point, because we did a lot of revising of that section. So appreciate people's comments. So then next we're going into the inventory. And this would be an inventory of all their public access sites, regardless of ownership. So including in the inventory, even those that are within state parks or in federal lands, things like that, because they are providing public access within that jurisdiction. But then recognizing that a lot of other parts of this rule are not dictating anything within those other jurisdictions, but only those within the local government's control. So then using the decadal database from DLCD as a starting point for the inventory, and then including a certain information for each of those sites. We did kind of streamline this a little bit, and that again is kind of based on what is feasible for the local governments and the fact that the inventory is really, I mean, it's just one of many inventories that the local government has to have, and it is static. It has to be static until it's updated, and then it's not really like public information in the sense of like going to get access information. So we'll kind of just skip on down to implementation, which is once the access inventory is completed, then the local government must adopt the program into the comprehensive plan. And when they do that, they adopt implementing policies and ordinances to protect, maintain, and enhance public access. And then those implementing policies and ordinances must address the following at a minimum. And so then there's a list of things that we've talked about at various times. And then what I wanted to share is, yeah, these are the parts I think where we had a lot of conversation before, and I've kind of like streamlined it into this one section of how to avoid or minimize potential impacts to coastal resources or to cultural areas from existing or new coastal public access sites, and how that might be addressed in policies or implementing code, and using that coordination to develop those items. And then they can add additional implementing policies and ordinances that go beyond minimum requirements, and those are additional considerations. There also must be a plan for maintenance of those sites, and that can be somewhere other than the comprehensive plan, or yeah, because sometimes that might exist in something like a capital improvements plan or a transportation system plan or something like that. So trying to be flexible there. And then DLCD will update our inventory once we get that updated list within a year of the plan amendment notice. And then they have to identify a process for updating on a regular basis. So that is a quick run through of the whole section. But yeah, happy to take questions and comments. I think everyone's getting tired. That's okay. I understand. Go ahead, Breeze.
So on my version, it's line 168. Here, it's the middle of 18A, where it says, when determining areas of increased coastal public access sites, local governments may also identify areas where public access may not be, etc.
Yes.
But above, it's a shall statement. They must address the following. Is there any way of, or is it appropriate to adjust that local governments may? Because if you're already being told that you must, you're now creating this alternate level for these other things.
Yeah, it's supposed to be just for this sentence. I struggled a lot with where to put this one. But yeah, it's a good point about the may versus shall. So we can move it potentially.
I like that if there's room for it to no longer be may, but something along, when determining areas for increased, we just take out that may. Public access, or local governments will also identify areas where public access, or local governments will include identification of areas, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I guess my thought was that that might not be the case for every jurisdiction. Like there might not be areas that are off limits for access everywhere. Like, in certain cities, they might be like so built up, right, that there's not necessarily like areas to avoid, but
Yep.
that's an assumption there.
And what I'm aiming for is if there isn't an option, how does one know? You know, because you actually are obligated to look and go
Yeah.
presence or absence. And I guess that's where I'm stuck with this local governments may choose not to look. And by choosing not to look, you won't succeed in identifying a risk factor.
Yeah, I think it could be reworded to
Okay.
be like a requirement to analyze it,
Yep.
but the outcome isn't predetermined, right? Like you don't
Uh,
have to identify sites that are off limits, right? But you have to have thought about it.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm aiming for.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. I appreciate your clarification, and that reassured me. As I listened to Brees, I had concerns about additional administrative burden. And if the way you phrased it is the way it will operate, I don't want to do that scope creep that results in additional burden on local.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Good point.
I agree.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll work on that, like reframing that sentence a little bit. Cool. Other thoughts, concerns? Yeah, Mandy, go ahead.
Thanks. This isn't pertaining to a specific section, and I apologize for my ignorance here, but I was wondering if DLCD can impose administrative penalties, like say like a beachfront property owner puts up like a private no beach access sign on an inventoried right of way, like who technically would be responsible for enforcing that? And I know that sounds crazy, but it happens all the time in other states.
Yeah. No, it happens here all the time too. I mean,
Oh, no way. Wow. I haven't been there here that long, so.
I mean, that is kind of what I was working towards with this part. But it is really like an enforcement issue, and that is up to local governments. Like DLCD has no authority to do that. We could just like notify the local government or DSL or OPRD or something to say like, hey, somebody told us about the sign and it's actually a public access. So like, can you go check it out or something? But yeah, we have no authority to do that. But it would be probably an enforcement thing, which I think they could do through like code amendments, something around like what is not allowed and what happens if it's done if it's not allowed. Yeah, so that was my hope with that part of it. But I don't know if other local governments want to talk about that at all in their experience, because yeah, I know that this can come up some. Yeah, Scott.
I like the enforcement piece. I think that leaving it the way it is probably fine. The blocked is a big deal. Oftentimes people park at those emergency access points, and so they will literally be blocked. So it is enforcement. In those cases, it can be towed, or the police can issue citations. But I think that requirement for enforcement is pretty good. Like you said, DLCD has no way of doing that. It's just something that the locals will have to work on.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point.
Okay, Meg, just want to do a quick time check. It's 1/4 after, and we still have the fiscal impact statements.
Yeah, and this is pretty much it. I think this is the last section until we get back to the where we started, which was the modifying coastal public access site. So I think we're good. But yeah, if people want to talk any more about this piece of it, I think another this is a change from the first go round is this like plan for maintenance of inventoried sites. I mean, that was there before, but having it be like just something that the local government needs to develop, but where it is up to them. It used to be in the inventory, I think, but we moved it from that to just be its own requirement, recognizing that like there can be complexities here, which is actually why we wanted to include it in the first place, because this is something that comes up a lot, kind of related to what Mandy just brought up of like the signs and blocking access. Like another big deal is like who's on first almost with like maintaining an access, because there is like overlap between maybe a city, a county, and the state parks, like all in one area, and no one's quite sure always of like who is responsible for like grading that area or maintaining it, or who owns it and where the right of way is and all that kind of stuff. I know it's actually a big issue in Manzanita right now, and the city is working with state parks on it because they have huge dunes that the sand keeps inundating the public access points, and so there's just been a lot of challenge there, and so they're actually going to come up with like an intergovernmental kind of agreement on maintaining those access ways. So that was kind of like one of the reasons for putting this in there, but I know that this is probably easier said than done. So if anyone has any thoughts about that one, happy to hear.
Okay. I think we're good, man.
Okay, well, thank you all. I appreciate your time spent on this. I know it's a lot to get through and can be kind of tedious, so I appreciate you working with us. If it's helpful, I can send this as a Word document to people so that you could make comments or do track changes in the document directly, and then get it back to me by next Thursday, I believe is February 26th. That gives me some time to work on it before I have to get it to our Department of Justice for their review. So it gives you all some time to, ruminate on what you heard today and what we discussed, and maybe provide those written comments back to us, so we have them and can consider them in the final draft rule. So now we have the next super fun piece, which is the impact statements. Did Jerry join us? I don't see him. Okay, Jerry is the consultant who was working on this, but he had a conflict today, so he wasn't sure he was going to be able to join or not.
AC?
Cool.
Oh.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so as a reminder, that's the wrong screen, sorry. Impact statements that are required as part of any rulemaking that are done by the agencies. And there are 3 impact statements that we need to develop. There's a fiscal impact statement, and the housing impact statement, and the racial equity statement. And in the packet that you were able to get last week, there was a lot there. It was like maybe 28 pages, I think. So probably a lot to get through. And but some of it is just kind of like a summary of the rules and kind of like how the analysis was done. But the impact statements themselves are shorter, and hopefully you were able to kind of glean which was which. But we'll just focus on the impact statements themselves today. If you have questions or comments about the rest of it, the like narrative parts of it, you're certainly welcome to provide comments on those things. But I think just for time purposes in our conversation today, it will really just be on the impact statements themselves. So the fiscal impact statement, it's it's an analysis to say like who all could be impacted by this rule and what is the impact to them. And so this one has been broken down into 4 subsections: small and large businesses, local government, state agency, and public. So we'll start with the small and large businesses, which you can see here on your screen. I'll let you just, if you haven't already, just read through it, and see if there's, I mean, basically what I want to see from all of you, you don't have to wordsmith it, you don't have to like, any of that stuff. It's just like a gut check. Like, do you feel like this is an accurate reflection of the rules as you understand them? And do you feel like there's something missing? Like, is there a group of people out there who are going to be impacted by this more than we thought? Or, a business or something like that, because, coastal public access affects a lot of different entities. We are in a pretty specific realm of land use planning, but, it's certainly a big topic. So that's really what I'm looking for here is like your gut reaction. Is this look accurate or is it missing something? That kind of thing. Yeah, go ahead, Brees.
I don't know if it rises to the right threshold here. And we're just in talking about business, so it probably doesn't here. But in anticipation that coastal tribes in future years may be stepping more into marine resource like seaweed, kelp, coastal shellfish harvest, whether there may be that at a future point. I'm just being anticipatory. Where and how accesses or what particular accesses are designed for may be positive or negative. So again, it's not a now statement, but if this is going to stand for 20 years, I don't know if it's worth consideration.
Could I put it? I wonder if you could put it. Well, it's not really a tourism related industry, right? Like that would be.
No.
Yeah, it'd be something different. Yeah.
Yeah. And because the landscape that we're talking about is not in tribal trust, it's state land, and would require harvest permits and negotiated accesses. I guess maybe that's a future thing to worry about, not a now thing. But
well, thank you for flagging that. I'll just make a note of it. Anyone else on this one? Mr. Thompson?
Well, I think about offshore wind production and how there has been some issues have been raised about when cables come on shore before this, and now with offshore wind, I wonder if in the future there will be impact. I mean, we're not here to contemplate future impact, but it's a complicated issue. I don't know if somebody has a better answer. I just have a question.
So like the overlap between where cable landings might be versus where coastal access is, there could be a positive or negative impact there. Yeah.
That's what I want. That's what
I can put it to our consultant and see what he thinks.
Good.
I think most of those access points are generally private. So they
Yeah.
don't use public right of ways to, they have to actually buy oceanfront land for the landings typically, but you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner Thompson, a lot of them actually end up in state-owned lands, but even where they are tend to be, so they're underground first. And then they do have a little, oh gosh, the name escapes me, but there is a physical, structure that you see. It's still in the ground, but there is a physical structure that you can see. And that would just be part of the process. So if they were to go through a permit process and with the local jurisdiction, because that's what would be triggered at that point, and OPRD, then if they, for some reason, that was the only site on the whole coast that they could pull it up, then the county or city could request that they identify another location that they could, for example, use to mitigate the loss of that site and create another one. So, or provide funds to do that, however that would work with that jurisdiction. But that's a good question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh yeah, beach manholes, that's the word. Thanks, Laurel. Okay, so I've scrolled up to local government costs. So I anticipate, this would be the biggest cost of the rules would be to local governments. So here's the summary. I think there's a little more. Yeah, so I'll just put this first half for now and then scroll for the second half. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Thompson.
Well, isn't it just the not just the preparation, but also the maintenance? This is going to be a gift that keeps on giving.
Yes. Let's scroll. I'll say one thing that struck me about this is that it's true that this requirement already exists, and this is clarifying something that already exists and has for 50 years. My knowledge of what the comp plans and stuff actually say is that they're not really fully doing what the goal anticipates. So I would say that it actually could be a bigger cost than what this is implying, because it's saying that, maybe a lot of these jurisdictions are already doing these things, and I don't think that they are. So my thought would be that this is actually more work than what the consultant maybe is thinking. That's my takeaway. I don't know if other people feel that way too. Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that unfortunately, as much as I love good comprehensive plans, they don't always get used as well and as often as they should.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very fair critique. I did have one thought about the cost that might be it's the cost of the quasi judicial land use decision in terms of
Mhm.
staff time. You might have had it in there and I just missed it, but in your bullet
Yeah,
point.
I don't think they did. Yeah, that's a good one.
And and whether it's staff hours or the cost of mailing or advertising in the whatever it may be, there's it's not substantial, but there is minimal
Yeah,
cost associated there.
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it would still be, under the coastal public access program, it's a voluntary choice to go down that pathway. But if a jurisdiction, like Manston and Seaside, which Scott is working with now, are doing their own comp plan updates, they're like, okay, well, we're going to do goal 17. And so we're going to now have to comply with this new rule. So I do think that it's going to be a cost for local governments to comply. Okay, so state agency costs. So for state agency friends on the phone, please feel free to speak up. A lot of it is directed at DLCD and the costs that we will have, but I anticipate that there will be a cost to other organizations too, because we have the must coordinate with other state agencies. So I anticipate that's a cost for you all as well. And the tribes too. So that's a cost for the tribes too, for that coordination. Yeah, Bruce, go ahead.
I was going to wait to say it, but in looking at this, the next category of grouping is the public.
Mhm.
I've never seen it done, so it's a new space. But what is the potential for there to actually be inclusion of tribe costs as a separate call out, the way that we have agency costs?
Yeah.
Um,
I was wondering that too, actually.
It's not out of alignment with, we mentioned the offshore wind. There is the offshore wind roadmap that has called out the importance of tribal cost in that. So this would be in alignment with a very separate document, but there's a little proximity there.
Yeah, I think that like in the roadmap, it's, well, this focuses on the state costs, as does the roadmap. It acknowledges the cost. And I think we could do that here, but I don't know if it, much like the roadmap and the capacity assessment, I don't know if it can so much as factor into the decision as much as understanding that we're going to be putting a burden on the tribes, on local governments, that maybe we don't even fully appreciate what those costs are yet.
And maybe is there room, because I really take your point there, Lisa, because it's not to fully step into that, but maybe that there are going to be other obligated costs. And just almost as a footnote.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Instead of working in a silo, which is often what happens.
Yeah, completely.
Do you think, Brees, it would be fair to say that the cost for tribes for this would be similar to the other state agencies because of the requirement for coordination?
Yeah, the same. Now I'm going to be very narrow from my own experience.
Yeah.
Something like this is likely to intersect with a minimum of 3 different departments within the tribe. So the same way that you're intersecting with a minimum of 5 or 6 different state agencies.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I'll point that out for our consultant and see if we can add something in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see, I feel like there was. Yeah, I think this must be the one main section, is that other agencies identified in the coordination requirements would need to dedicate time for review. And then, yeah, the rest are mostly directed at DLCD's cost. This one I honestly think is a little bit weird and maybe not worth calling out, about funding that might provide for like public access, but I mean, it's already happening, so I don't know that this would change anything. Like, we wouldn't get new money because of this rule. I mean, that would be
Yeah.
nice, but we won't be. So I might just ask that this be.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that, Meg.
No, it's I just, when I was reviewing it, I think it was probably just I was going too quickly, and so okay, so
Yeah.
Okay. And then for the public one, I think it was pretty straightforward that there's lots of benefits with public access generally. And so this would be kind of like in that same vein. Potentially improving access over time. I mean, this is again long-term planning, so it wouldn't be immediate, but it could provide increased public access over time. And it could be welcomed by businesses, but maybe not welcome for impacted residents, but they're generally pretty minimal. Any other thoughts on that one? Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Thompson.
Well, yeah. So from where we are sitting in this group, it may be perceived as minimal. I can tell you that for the affected landowners, the local neighbors, it can loom large, and that can have ripple effects. It's outside the purview of the administrative rule structure. It is, however, reality testing for the department and for everybody involved. I mean, that's it. That's enough to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, the housing impact statement is pretty straightforward. That basically, I mean, the rule, how we need to address this part of the statement is pretty prescribed in the rule language, and it's about constructing a 1,200 foot square single family detached dwelling on a 6,000 square foot parcel. So like, would these rules like change the cost of those development costs? And so I think generally the impact is not expected to have a significant effect on that. So I don't know if anyone feels anything differently, but generally these rules are really not about housing. I mean, to Commissioner Thompson's point, they are like, they're homes around public access points, of course, and those potentially could be impacted. But the cost of actually building that home is probably not really impacted by these rules. And then finally, we had the racial equity statement, which doesn't have a lot of clarity in its requirements. But our Department of Justice has advised us on this for the last couple of years since it's been in place. And it's analyzing, determining the racial groups that will be affected by the rule and how the rule will increase or decrease disparities currently experienced by those groups. And so the consultant's draft says it basically doesn't really necessarily do anything one way or the other to impart bias on coastal public access, on how these requirements are around coastal public access sites, and that generally they're providing benefit, but without implicit bias. So I don't know if And then the last sentence too, Brees, would be good for your input. Federally recognized tribes would be granted clear protection and input for cultural resources. Which, I mean, there's more language in there, but I don't know how that feels. But or you're on mute, I think.
I guess my question is the word clear or clear protection and input. What is clear protection?
Right. I guess my edit to this would probably be that there's a outline process for coordination, but the outcomes are not dictated by the rule. So it doesn't necessarily mean that anything would be further protected. Maybe it would, but maybe it wouldn't.
Yeah. I think that for many tribes, the word clear is going to be a stumbling block. And in all transparency, most tribes are going to immediately turn to government relationship, which in all fairness muddies the water when there's a well laid out process, which is what all this is intended for. So I guess I would maybe propose federally recognized tribes, or something along the lines of this does not erode or erase the rights and responsibilities of federally recognized tribes to engage in in consultation or coordination. Something, again, your DOJ will have the right wording.
Okay.
But the placeholder's there, and it's good to call out that there's a ripcord if necessary, but hey, let's all try to stick to this process because it's well thought out, it's considered. Let's stick here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Any other thoughts on the rest of the racial equity statement? Okay. Well, if anyone wants to take more time and look through it and provide statement written comments, please feel free. Okay. So we're almost done. The final thing I just wanted to share with everyone is just the timeline of the next steps of this process. So let me share my screen again. Okay, so this was our third Rulemaking Advisory Committee meeting, and I appreciate you all being here and being part of this. We'll be meeting with just the local government Rulemaking Advisory Committee members tomorrow to kind of hear more about from their perspective, since this is a rule that they'll be primarily implementing. So we'll be meeting with them as a smaller technical advisory group tomorrow. And then I'll continue to revise the rules. So like I said a few times, please take time to submit written comments on the rules or the impact statements. I will share with you today the Word document, so that maybe will make it easier than having the PDF. And if you could get me those comments by the end of the day on February 26th, that would be much appreciated. Then we're going to kind of take a little bit of a pause for to allow the public comment period to go through its thing. So we're going to file the draft rules with the Secretary of State, which they'll publish on April 1st. That will start the official public comment period, and that will go until May 14th. And that is one day after our last RAC meeting, which is May 13th, 1 to 4 again. And then we will hold a public hearing with our Land Conservation Development Commission at their April meeting, which is April 23rd and 24th. It will be in Salem, I believe, but it always has virtual options. So you can sign up to testify online, or you can provide written comment. We will also be having a geographic hearing on May 4th in Newport, and that will allow for both in-person and virtual testimony to be received. It will be in the evening at the Oregon Coast Community College. And we have to have a geographic hearing for any rules that are specific only to one geography of the state. But the geographic hearing and the hearing with the commission are essentially the same. And so you are welcome to testify at both, but you really don't have to. One is totally fine because it all just goes to our commission anyway. It will just be me at the geographic hearing, so it's not as exciting as probably going to the commission. And they'll get a summary of all the comments that we provide. And then we will have that final meeting. We'll revise the rules based on the directives from the commission and public comment. And then we'll have the final adoption hearing with the Land Conservation Development Commission on June 25th and 26th. So the same thing will apply there. They'll have virtual and in-person attendance options in Salem. But, virtual is completely fine. And we're going to likely have a webinar with our local government partners outside of this group. So all the ones on the coast will be open for that webinar probably in mid-April during the public comment period. I think that's the gist of the schedule. Hopefully I didn't miss any key pieces. Does anyone have any questions about that, the timeline or any next steps? Okay, so this is just a reminder slide for everyone, especially those who might be viewing on YouTube, that we have some resources for the rulemaking on our website. All the rulemakings are listed on the same page, and you have to scroll down to the Goal 17 Coastal Public Access page. You can sign up for Gov delivery notices there, which are email newsletter. And then if you do want to submit public comments, you can submit them to that email address, which is coastal.policy@dlcd.oregon.gov. And also meeting summaries and packets and all that stuff is on the rulemaking website. And I think that's it. So maybe Commissioner Thompson, if you want to give us some closing remarks, and then we'll let everyone go a little early.
Well, yay, team. Isn't it just the best to talk about the ocean and how do we share it and how do we protect it and how do we take everything into account that should be taken into account, and the careful attention of the people who didn't have much to say, and the just thank everyone for being here and looking forward to the next step of the process. Thank you, capable staff.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you soon. Thank you.